Yeah, your mic's also hot, damn. Welcome to the show. This is Common Thread to do this every Thursday night here in Brooklyn, New York. What a show we've got. You're going to say, JD, you say this every time. You always come out there, you say it's going to be a great show. This time I actually mean it. Tonight on the show, after the devastating election results, should Democrats be moving closer to democratic socialism, or should they be steering far clear of that phrase? We'll debate that in just a bit. Plus, in a preview of things way too early to talk about, why not? Who are Democrats already favoring for 2028? Yeah, there was already a poll put out about it. We'll chat about that in a bit. And as always, our guests, one conservative, one liberal, will say something nice about the other side, because that's what we're here to do. But first, the latest on the good, the bad, the sometimes kind of strange picks for Donald Trump for his incoming cabinet. With a bit of breaking news in the last half hour, Donald Trump selecting former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi for Attorney General of the United States. This is the type of thing, when I just saw it on Twitter in the last few minutes, it's sort of like, oh yeah, of course it was going to be Pam Bondi. Like, wasn't this always going to be Pam Bondi? Like, this just seems like such an intuitive fit. This obviously, after now former Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz was up for the job, met with senators, determined there was no path forward amid a avalanche of ethics concerns, both current as well as former. This is what Donald Trump had to say. He posted this a bit. I haven't read this. We're reading this. We're learning this together, folks. Proud to announce former AG of Florida Pam Bondi as our next Attorney General of the U.S., prosecutor for nearly 20 years, tough on violent criminals, made the streets safe. As first female AG, she worked to stop trafficking of deadly drugs, reduce the tragedy of fentanyl overdose deaths. She did such an incredible job. I've asked her to serve on our opioid and drug abuse commission during my first term, which saved many lives. That again just posted there. Florida's based, someone writes there in the comments. That of course just posted here in the last little bit. Let's bring in our guests because I want to hear what they have to say about Pam Bondi as the new pick for AG. We got Allie Rogers. Allie is CEO of Young Americans Against Socialism. Great to have you here, Allie, making your Common Threads debut. And Brian McCullough, old friend, supportive housing director at BronxWorks here in New York City, supports the formerly homeless of the great city of New York. Brian, Allie, my thanks to you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. Allie, I'm very grateful for your time that you're here. Obviously, this is just breaking news, but let me get your reaction specifically here to the announcement of Pam Bondi to serve as our nation's next Attorney General before we talk about some of the other picks of the last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'm excited about this. I think this is just in response to the last 4 years that we've seen where the Biden admin was extremely soft on crime. We had George Soros district attorneys across the country who have implemented destructive policies that have enabled criminals to, cause havoc across the country. And I'm, from California, and I actually, in my personal life, campaigned on the recall campaign for George Gascon. And I saw firsthand the destructive policies that these things have caused around the world or across the nation. And I think also this pick is really exciting. And it's in response to, the left talking point on how Trump is a misogynist and hates women. And of course, he picks Pam Bondi, the strong figure who has obviously led Florida into great success on keeping, crime down. And, the drugs across the state in control. And this is, a great pick. So I'm excited.
Brian, I'd been sitting there the last, maybe 10 days or so since some of these picks started to come out. And I wondered which ones were really the people that Trump wanted, as opposed to trying to dangle out a few that the president-elect knew would not get Senate support. And it allows him to say, aha, all right, well, you didn't give me the person that I wanted. So instead, let's go with my second option, who actually may have been his first option overall. That's how the Pam Bondi thing reads to me, because I feel like had Pam Bondi been put out first, right, you spend all this political capital trying to dismantle Matt Gaetz. Now Pam Bondi, who, if I'm not mistaken, was also one of the impeachment attorneys for Donald Trump when that was adjudicated over in Congress, is now the pick. Brian, what say you on this news?
Make America Florida again. Let's go. So she's obviously a very qualified blonde. I'm glad she was able to turn around the entire country's criminal trends. Thank you, Allie, for not giving any statistics. Obviously, there aren't any to support Pam Bondi doing anything of substance. As someone who actually helps people impacted by substance use and crime. Allie, you must have had to get really, really up close to actually see any of this crime wave you're talking about, because that's just not anyone's lived reality here in America. Maybe Canada, but
well, I think you're mistaken for that, for sure. In California, I grew up going to San Francisco casually with friends in high school. I was safe enough to go hang out in the cafe, do my homework and things like that. And as I grew up and, experienced San Francisco, I lived in LA for 9 years. I knew people personally. My friend had her car broken into several times. I had my car broken into several times. Just in my friend's neighborhood, someone was shot walking their dog. So these things are happening because criminals are emboldened by these leftist policies.
Well, going back to actual statistics, homelessness is immediately impacted by cost of living. And so when cost of living goes up because of all of the capitalists in San Francisco that are driving up home prices, that has a material impact on homelessness and crime. So if we had more supportive housing, if we were able to provide more stability and not jail cell, I know permanent housing comes in many forms, but that's not the one that has any sort of material impact on the well-being of our neighbors.
I'm going to kick this back to Allie in a second, but as I've listened to you two already, and first of all, thank you for being willing to just respectfully, I don't want to say go at it, but carry the conversation, because I think that's what we really want. And here's kind of where I sit, maybe in the middle of both of you, and maybe this is more of a challenge to Brian than to Allie.
Sure.
I also live here in New York, and Brian, what I think has really frustrated a lot of people, I live in Queens. What's frustrated a lot of people here, and I think Allie would be inclined to agree, I don't know, Allie, but maybe I'm not wrong, is, right here in New York City in just the last 5 days, we've had a number of instances. We had a guy who has been arrested time and time and time and time again. And it took acts of severe violence and murder for him to finally be brought to justice. As a tax-paying, I love this city. I will spend the rest of my life in New York City, whether I want to or not, because I just love it here and this is where my family is. I cannot for the life of me understand how that is allowed to happen. And I think that just absolutely breaks the brain of New Yorkers. It breaks the brain of Americans to say, for the love of God, it's one thing to understand, have a good faith conversation about the impact of mental health, cost of living crisis, what it means for the homelessness challenges. The services we're not providing veterans who suffer from PTSD and acts of violence that may come about as a result, all well and good. But Brian, you got to admit, something is fundamentally broken with the system. And I think this really pissed off a lot of voters in a lot of parts of the country that said, you know what, fuck it. I am voting for Donald Trump and the Republicans, because I do not want to put on my local news in New York City and see that a guy had to kill 3 New Yorkers in broad daylight, unplanned attacks, no warning, no notice, and to find out that he has been the ultimate subject of recidivism. This is a guy who has been in and out of prison repeatedly. Brian, that to me speaks to a clear failure. I'll go to Brian first before I kick it back to Allie.
Sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. First of all, Queens, best food in New York City. I think we can agree on that. Thank both of you for your anecdotes, personal anecdotes. So New York has never been safer outside of anecdotes. Yes, the system is failing. I agree with you there. I've been in many, many courtrooms and seen it firsthand. Now, again, this is bigger than just being able to put people behind bars. That doesn't solve any problems. We want to talk about solutions. I'm happy to talk about solutions. I don't think any fall within the political bandwidth of the mainstream sort of political dichotomy at the moment. If you're willing to sort of open our minds up to a more vibrant, diverse catalog of answers, we might actually be able to solve any of the problems that Donald Trump certainly isn't going to solve, and Harris probably wasn't going to solve anyway.
Allie, either to that point or what we had mentioned earlier, because as you both spoke, like I said, I think there's maybe something to be said about the common ground, and that's what we're here to find. Allie, over to you.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to applaud, Brian's efforts to, try to help these former homeless. From what I understand, your work is helping them get back on their feet. However, you did mention something about the capitalists in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. Well, you failed to recognize the level of government regulation and tax in that area that those people vote for. And then when it becomes so overwhelming for those companies to continue to keep up with these regulations and taxes, they bail on the state and they leave and they flee to Texas, where there's no state income tax and there's more, there's more freedom and less regulation for these businesses, where economic growth thrives when there's less government regulation and control. I understand your concern for the homeless, but let's get down to the real issue. We're letting drugs in. We're being soft on crime. We're allowing these drug dealers to distribute the fentanyl and cocaine, whatever it is, out on the street these days. And ultimately, it's harming the American public. We need more, regulation and control on what's allowed on the street, and allow officers to do their job, to put these drug dealers in prison. And Trump is very open with saying that he wants to go after them. And I agree that, if someone sells drugs and it kills someone, that person needs to face the repercussions of those choices. And yeah, I think that the homeless issue also obviously is a mental health issue. We have a mental health issue in our country, and it's sad to see. It's really sad.
For sure. We had this comment here from Murphy O'Halloran, and this is, and I understand Brian's point, right? There is a difference between, national facts and figures versus vibes and personal impressions and like anecdotes. And I completely agree. Like, yes, I live in Queens. I commute to Manhattan every day of my life. For the vast majority of my exchanges on the MTA, although I hate taking the train, like, I do feel safe. I've never felt personally threatened. That can be true at the same time that I am absolutely beyond frustrated with a system that allows for clearly people who are not rehabilitated enough to be out in society to now be in a position to cause violent crimes. Murphy O'Halloran with this smash and grab comment, legit a problem here in San Francisco. Because you both have already cooked on this, I'm going to give you both the opportunity. Quick final words, 20 seconds each if I can. Brian, first to you before we move on to the next topic. That's a lot.
You know, like they say, bad apple spoils the bunch. I would like to see if there is such a fidelity to law and order on the Republican side that they exercise that on their own before scapegoating others, because we can't really take them seriously on law and order, can we, if this is the rogues gallery of a cabinet and the head of the snake, so to say, in the White House. So,
Allie?
I guess my final words are that comment is absolutely true. I know multiple people who have parked at the airport in and out to grab a burger before their flight, and before their burger's ready, their suitcase is stolen and their window is smashed. People parking in San Francisco with their windows rolled down is a reality, and that's just the fact of living in California these days. So it's a very real thing.
All right, appreciate that. We're going to come back to at least parts of this conversation. We're going to move on. You know, sometimes we try and work on some more like social political stories that are things that are people talking about, so we're not so in the weeds, because like we are politics nerds. We can do that. So do we have the Jaguar thing it's a regular SOT we're tossing to? Is that right? It's a soundbite. Okay, so this is the now infamous rebrand from the folks over at Jaguar, which are being called by many Bud Light 2.0, accusations of wokeism, going too far, questions from Elon Musk of like, are you even selling cars? Here's what Jaguar released this week. We'll take a listen, and I'll ask you both about it on the other side. All right. Copy nothing. Are the mics out or no? Allie, I'm sure you've seen, first of all, I don't know if either of you are like big fans of Jaguar cars in general or your thoughts about this, but obviously this is, for good or for bad, being tied into kind of election carryover, and a lot of people saying, I'm sorry, Jaguar, like, have you not been reading the tea leaves about where people feel about, I don't even know where to go, but Allie, your thoughts either on that or the conversation that, for good or for bad, has now tied that ad back into the world of politics the last 72 hours?
Geez, I mean, my first reaction when I saw that come out, I was just like, this is bizarre. And I totally agree with Elon. It's very unclear whether or not they're still selling cars. And it just it speaks to postmodernism and the loss of true art in our society. And a lot of these brands, these rebrands in the last few years have just kind of swifted into this monotone look that gets lost, and the messaging isn't clear for such an iconic multi-generational brand like Jaguar is. They lost their legacy with this rebrand, and it's sad to see.
Brian,
yeah, what are your thoughts, Brian? Go ahead.
How dare they? Come on, they're just going to lose Joe Six-Pack to Zoolander Teletubbies? Come on. This is like, art is straight white men on horses looking off into the distance, not this. Come on. I mean, who's going to be talking about this in about 3.5 minutes? Let's be real here. America is the most propagandized country in the entire world, far more than even North Korea. If this is the sway that commercials have on us, come on. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm at a loss for words. Clearly, I miss this because hopefully the algorithms got something right and know that I'm not the demographic for these commercials. But
Listen, that could be part of it. I mean, I'm far too online, and I'm still linked up to Twitter X, and that's obviously where I saw it. But that also gets into a bit of a different conversation. We have this conversation a lot on this show. It's the idea of social media ecosystems like echo chambers. Where you're probably much more likely to see that ad on Twitter X and people ripping it apart, maybe than you would over on like a Blue Sky or a Threads with a presumably more liberal audience. Let's do. Okay, here's a comment. Here we go. I'm a big fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They suck, but are still somehow better than that rebrand. I could also say the same for the New York Football Giants. All cars will have 4 wheels, says Murphy O'Halloran. So kind of the same mold, right? Gave off early Apple marketing vibes. Yeah, sometimes there's a big swing and miss from companies. Remember, Apple's gotten it right, Apple's gotten it wrong. This to me is the kind of Bud Light thing. I don't think we have the Shane Gillis ad from this week, but I understand, obviously I picked the topic, so I thought it was worth mentioning because it is being tied into politics for the week. But yes, I think to Brian's point, I do agree we're probably making a little too much of these ads, and we'll see if there's a reversion back to the middle. All right, Brian, Allie, stay with us. We got to take a quick break here and get a word from our sponsors. Listen, they're paying the bills, folks. That's what we got to do. All right, heads up, one and all, interest rates are falling. The good news is you can still lock in a 6% plus yield with a bond account from our friends over at public.com. It's a pretty big deal. It's a huge deal, some would say, because when rates drop, so can the interest you earn on your investment. A bond account lets you lock in a 6% plus yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade corporate bonds. So while other people are watching their returns shrink, don't worry, you could sit back with regular interest payments. But you might want to act fast because your yield is not locked in until you actually invest. The good news, it takes just a few minutes to get set up. There it is. Scan the QR code. It's public.com/CT. Just takes a few minutes. Lock in a 6% plus yield with a bond account only at public.com/CT. Thank you, as always, to our good friends over at Public. Okay, let's bring back in Allie and Brian. Obviously, another big topic of conversation. We talked about it a bit on last week's show, is the Department of Government Efficiency. I have not asked you both about it, but we do have news on it insofar as Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk writing that op-ed in the Washington Post, where they write, the two of us will advise Doge at every step to pursue 3 major kinds of reform: regulatory recessions, administrative reductions, and cost saving. Bizarrely to me was that the two of them felt the need to specifically name check the Corporation of Public Broadcasting and even Planned Parenthood. So that to me says, all right, now you're kind of getting into a little bit of a game with this whole thing because you're intentionally trying to ruffle feathers and get people kind of worked up over things. But regardless, Allie, Brian, I'm gonna start with you here. Do you take this seriously, or is this a bit more of a sideshow here during the lame duck transition?
Isn't like a real government agency that has any sort of powers of compulsion, and it's just sort of giving the most annoying guy in the room with all the money a busy work job, so hopefully Congress, even if it's Republican, can tell them to just respectfully fuck off when the time comes. But this, as the CEO of YAS, I think you could probably speak to not only the dangers of socialism and communism, but also fascism and sort of the combination of the corporation and the state, which is what we're actually seeing. And so that's what this is to me. That's what I'm seeing. And I think the, historians and everyone else sees it too. So,
Allie, I'd imagine you're more enthused about the idea. I think everyone could admit to some degree, yeah, does the government do a lot of wasteful stuff? For sure. Is it inherently a bad idea to have what's not an official department? Let's be clear, only Congress can establish a department. It's obviously just part of the name for Elon Musk and the Dogecoin and the Shibas and this and that. Fine. It's a government agency created by executive order. They don't have the power to change anything. They just make recommendations. Those recommendations need to be enacted by Congress. If you don't use budget reconciliation, you basically need 60 senators to change these things anyway. So I'm suspicious about how far these actually recommendations can go if you do need 60 votes in the Senate. But Allie, your thoughts on what we've heard from Ramaswamy and Musk, because it certainly is at least something different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is in response to just people wanting more transparency and accountability in our government. And I think that there's so much that is done behind closed doors that the American people just aren't really aware about. And once we gain awareness, where we can actually have the knowledge to understand that we have millions and millions of our tax dollars being spent on ridiculous programs that are so unnecessary and can easily be, invested in the important, NGOs, nonprofits, go back to the states, whatever it is, to be more efficient. And so that, people who actually want to make a difference in their local government and local communities can use these funds and not be, seeing $1 million go to study promiscuous behavior of birds in Japan. It's ridiculous that the extent of, where our government has spent our money. And, I think really this will allow people to see with, more clarity of where our, tax dollars have been going all these years. And ultimately, of course, the authenticity and the way that they're able to actually cut this spending, we'll just have to kind of see. Well, who knows what can happen, but I'm hopeful.
Wait,
I admit, I missed the promiscuous Japan storyline. I got to be honest. That's just something that I missed. But Brian, though, and I wonder from your perspective, Brian, is there any part of this that makes you say, you know what, if it takes an outsider to come and make recommendations to gut some fat of the federal government that can further benefit the work that we do at a BronxWorks, that we do at the state and local level, is that something you might actually say, yeah, you know what, if that's kind of part of what comes out of this, we take from the federal government and we're able to better provide on the ground community level support where people most need it, maybe that's not a bad thing, Brian?
No, I mean, if they wanted to, search the couch cushions for the trillions of dollars that the military doesn't account for every single year, I'd take some of that, probably be put to better use, instead of killing brown people overseas. But this is not what's going to happen. We both can agree on that.
I'll chime in on the military spending. I am excited to, have the Doge to actually help bring people some more awareness to that unnecessary spending and that lack of accountability. I think the Pentagon just failed their 7th audit or something like that. That has to end. And I think that's something that we can both agree on. The American people deserve that accountability and that transparency from our government. And when, these government agencies don't have that and they run reckless, it's destroying our country in the long run.
Yes.
Yes, that's it. That's the eternal wasn't it James Joyce said the most important word in the English language was the word yes? It's the eternal affirmation. So that's what we're all about on the show. We're all about eternal affirmations and find the common ground. The real Alex Max says try analyzing the budget, the military budget first. There's trillions there. Wasn't Alex Mack the character from that Nickelodeon show?
Yes.
Remember Alex Mack, right? That's a real, there was. So I don't know if that's the Nickelodeon character from the 90s watching the show, but thanks a lot for
Secret
that.
World,
No, I think we could both agree. I mean, and that also gets to the point of, not to go back to earlier's topic, but Pete Hegseth overseeing a department that's got, 3 million people around the world and a budget of almost $900 billion with no senior military experience. Maybe that is what a lot of people want, but if that ends up being one of his biggest hangups in the Senate, that's the part of it that I think most trips him up. It's the scale of Pentagon spending, which maybe all three of us agree that should be dismantled a bit. Brian, last comments to you here, and then I'll kick it over to Allie.
Well, first we have to handle all of the reckless spending of PBS before we can handle the trillions of military misplaces every year. So can't wait for that.
Am I the only one who doesn't get the reference? The spending of what? PBS. Oh, PBS. Oh, got it. I was like, what acronym? Did I just never hear it before? Allie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to look forward to here. Like I said, this will ultimately bring more public awareness to where our tax dollars are going. Ultimately, every American should be invested in that. Obviously, it's something that Trump ran on to make America great again. And, I think we have a lot to look forward to.
All right, next up, I want to get into, it's a bit of a bigger conversation here, but I think given Allie's specialty, it's kind of what I teased at the top of the show, this idea of, and I think you'd both have thoughts, To me in 2016, the greatest story in electoral politics, had it not been for Donald Trump, was the phenomenon of Bernie Sanders, the idea of democratic socialism. And I know obviously it's something like the branding has a lot of problems. But Sanders struggled with it. The Squad and the AOCs of the world have struggled with it. But there's still something about it that I think spoke to a lot of, as an outsider, to a lot of Americans frustrated with the system. I think that's why we had so many Bernie Sanders kind of Trump crossover supporters, that type of a vote. So Brian, first to you, and then I'm going to let Allie drill in, because I really know this is her specialty. Brian, your sense is we're still looking at the electoral dust settling after the shellacking, to use Barack Obama's famous term, from the recent election. Are you in the position where you say, yeah, you know what, Democrats should be leaning more into the rhetoric of the Bernie Sanderses of the world, or should they much more be playing this kind of presumed more moderate, centrist, don't talk about that type of stuff approach?
Well, I mean, it was the 44th biggest shellacking in the history of presidential politics. So let's, chill about that for a second. But yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to all of the anti-establishment fervor right now. And the Republicans are the only one addressing that and making people feel heard. And listen, I grew up in the 90s. I graduated college in 2008. I saw the world that was promised to me sort of disappear into thin air. And then the bankers and the capitalists are the ones who get the handouts, of course, as always. So, I think there's a lot of very innovative, even transgressive ideas on the left that, Democratic leadership is just not tapping into. And listen, people could argue that capitalism got us here and made a lot of, benefits. I won't, but the best case scenario of capitalism is burning this planet to the ground. That's the best case scenario. So we need to look beyond that. There might have been a time and a place. That chapter's over. So we need to move on. We need leaders that can speak to that and not tell people what they want to hear.
I'm a little more bullish on the state of the American financial markets. Maybe I've just been red-pilled for my years as a Wall Street reporter. Because, I definitely admit, I don't believe a lot of the same things now that I did when I first got into politics, covering this game 10 years ago. And I think a lot of that has just been my personal experience at the New York Stock Exchange. But Allie, obviously, I know this is your sweet spot. Give me your thoughts on kind of that post-mortem for Democrats. I know you're happy with the election results, but your thought on how this has been positioned. And I will admit, I do think a lot gets thrown at Democrats that are not necessarily based in fact. And I don't think that the Bernie Sanders coalition of what they're really seeking, is really that unreasonable. I do think they have a branding problem, Allie.
Good point. There's a lot to be said here. I come at it from a position of, there's a lack of education when it comes to, the young people of America understanding what socialism actually is. Socialism is the seizing of means of production by the government through force and control. That's what it comes down to. And when the left talks about capitalism, they love to riff on, the 1% and whatnot, but they always ignore the fact that their answer is more government control. And look at where that has gotten us. It's a chaos. It's reckless. And, there's truth to be said when, limiting government control and reducing those regulations allows for a free market to thrive. And when young people understand that, young people are naturally very excited and entrepreneurial, and they want to, live in a world where they can succeed. And fortunately for us, American values really champion that. And unfortunately, it is big government and big government control that hinders them from being able to go and, pursue those dreams that they have. Also, socialism obviously causes economic decay, societal chaos. It breeds corruption. It becomes authoritarianism. And it promises equality, but it leads to tyranny. And those are all things that aren't properly communicated to young people. So that's my take on it.
What was that? Well, hold on. I want that shit on a bumper sticker. It promises equality, but brings what was that?
But leads to tyranny.
I do like that phrase. I don't know that I entirely agree. I'm just saying, I like the phrase. So listen, maybe this is just like lazy I'm going to stay with Allie here for a second. Maybe it's just like lazy historical analysis. I get the Ronald Reagan approach of like government's not the answer, government is the problem, right? And I totally appreciate that, and I think that Americans, I think of a modern era would appreciate that. Allie, I can't help but remember because think about, because I work at the New York Stock Exchange, and because I know the times in American history where there have been epic and disastrous collapses of the financial system, that after Herbert Hoover sat on his hands and refused to do anything, it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt that came in with the New Deal, with sweeping mandate from the American people, election after election after election. The man was so socialist. If you're going to call the Bernie Sanders of the world a socialist, I don't understand how you're not going to look at FDR and socialist. And clearly we had this chapter not that long ago in American history where the man was so good at his job, we had to literally rewrite the rules to prevent other people from being president as long as FDR was. So how do you square through the lens of American history the times when objectively big government has come in times of crisis, have saved the day, have righted the ship, have set the course for multi-generational pathways to success through the lens of big government?
Well, I mean, we're kind of living in the destruction of it all right now. Look back at LBJ with his Great Society programs. One of the talking points I had written up here was about, the rising student debt, and he signed into law the what was it called? It's his Higher Education Act with his Great Society programs, and that essentially allowed students to borrow however much money they needed to attend college, all in the name of equality. And now we have just crazy tuition costs where young people feel like they have to, take on tens of thousands of dollars of debt, when it was a leftist Democrat that allowed that to happen ultimately. And sadly, a lot of the external issues with inflation and all of that lies with the Federal Reserve, and that is a private corporation that we can't have much control over within our government. And so that's kind of another topic, but that's also something that the left, ignores as well.
I'm a big fan of the Fed. I don't personally agree with this idea of like end the Fed or end the Fed mandate. I mean, to me, the reason that, and it is a different topic, you're right, but to me, the reason that we avoid a credit crisis, the likes of which Greece had or Venezuela had, is not just because we have the globe's dominant reserve currency. It's because we have an independent central bank that, free of political pressure, can manipulate interest rates to put pressure on private sector spending to cool down inflation, which a lot of these major economies around the world don't have. But Brian, back over to you, though, on this broader idea of socialism through the lens of history, democratic socialism. I mean, look, Brian, if you look at what the Bernie Sanderses and the AOCs of the world are actually advocating for, a higher social safety net, higher minimum wages, I don't know that I personally agree, because I know that puts upward pressure on inflation. Paid parental leave kind of seems like a bit of a bipartisan issue these days. Healthcare is a right, stronger environmental protections, free or affordable higher education. Brian, as far as I'm sitting, when you look at countries like Sweden and Norway and Denmark, and where Allie is up in Canada, these aren't considered wacky, loony, liberal, socialist talking points. It's a way of life in some of the happiest countries around the world.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for bringing up all those chaotic, authoritarian, socialist states in Scandinavia. God forbid. Yeah. We're not, if you want to get wacky with it, we can get wacky with it, but we're not even at that point. Thank you for bringing that up, that the Overton window has shifted so far right. But like, listen, school is unaffordable now because neoliberal policies at the state level have robbed the college systems, and a lot of the private colleges are their boards are just populated by finance guys who are treating it as an investment asset now. That's where the issue is, not because more people can now afford college. So, let's deal with what is actually making things harder for people.
I think we got a few comments. Can we pull up the comments into bigger boxes? I want to have Brian and Allie respond to them. I think we've been cooking with some good ones. Here we go. Republicans don't like the establishment, so they literally elect the billionaire Illuminati boogeymen themselves. I understand that argument, that criticism. Bernie was sadly never accepted by the Dems. We saw this in 2016 and 2020. America also already has socialism, by the way. The police force, the postal service, firefighters, Medicare. These are big sweeping government programs. Social Security, we all pay into paychecks. Out of our paychecks, we pay into Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Social programs to fund us and future generations of America, things we age into, right? Without government regulations, what will protect people from the free market that by definition values money over people's well-being? And finally, this segment brought to you by Laird's Applejack. Laird's by Be Democratically Sociable. Love that. Allie, back over to you here as you heard what Brian had to say there in response. Allie, what was interesting to me is I read this in Axios this morning. Just half of younger Americans now hold a positive view of capitalism. And this to me, what's going on up here? Brian and I seem to be about the same age because I graduated college in 2009, and people of my age range, 37, we lived through the dot-com bubble burst. We've seen market crashes. We've seen the great financial crisis. We've seen the pandemic. We've seen Occupy Wall Street. We have seen a system, as much as I now defend it, because I work at the New York Stock Exchange and I love the American financial markets. I also got to sit there, Allie, at the same point and say, yeah, do I understand why half of people under the age of 30 think that capitalism is failing us? I absolutely do, Allie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what? It's really sad because, the fact that, again, this big government control, the reckless spending is all ignored in that conversation. And I think that we really need to get back to free market principles, the economic growth, opportunity, all of that is super beneficial. And we don't want to lose that. Young Americans don't understand what happens when we do lose that and what life looks like under a socialist economy. For example, like you mentioned, I'm up in Canada, ironically, right now. And it took a long time for me to realize, okay, things are very different up here. People just think very differently than Americans, even though life, side by side looks pretty much the same. There's way less opportunity. There is way less options, in my opinion, starting with the grocery store. And it's been a really shocking experience to see it just firsthand. And just the way that the American economy operates has extremely more opportunity and variety, options, all of that. Americans are extremely blessed in that sense. And life outside of it is, not always super great and fun. So that's just my 2 cents.
Brian, I think the other advantage that Donald Trump or other Republicans have, and I remember reading a lot, maybe around the time of the last midterms about the way that this conversation gets weaponized to particular demographics of voters in a place like Florida, where you have a lot of Venezuelan Americans, you got a lot of Cuban Americans, and radio ads are being specifically produced in Spanish. They're talking about these big, scary terms where these are generations of families that have fled under, as Allie said before, appropriately, an authoritarian regime that has sought to take over the production and the distribution of goods and services, the government owning business. And so we throw around these big, scary words, and we convince people that that's what's happening. Brian, how do Democrats try and push back, try and correct that narrative, or at least illustrate the nuances to say, listen, I get that unfortunately Bernie Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist, and maybe it's not the greatest way to describe yourself, but that doesn't mean that everything he says is part of what you think socialism is. Because, Brian, there does seem to be a messaging mishap a little bit, a mismatch.
100%. I completely agree with you about the marketing of socialism, but you can't just be against something. You have to be for something. You have to have a positive vision to give people, and I think the way society right now is fractured because of, the failing institutions like capitalism. People are still yearning for community and identity and purpose. And Republicans have definitely given that to people and definitely told them what they want to hear. But that's the difference right now. Democrats aren't doing that. They're trying to have these mealy-mouthed half measures that are poll tested and don't really land with anyone because, that's the same playbook that has consistently failed people election after election after election after election. So, there's a lot of big ideas on the Republican side. They're all terrible and nightmarish, but that creates an opportunity for a better big vision. You got to have a better big vision, like FDR did in fighting fascism. Then Democrats have to be fighting fascism now, at home or abroad.
Let's take a look at a few user-submitted comments? Viewer-submitted comments. There we go. I like this one. Allie, I'm going to ask you this question. Why is Trump pushing tariffs and not let the free market dictate?
Well, I think when you look back at just the economic history of the U.S., oops, sorry, one of my lights just went out. When you look back at one of the history of the economic growth patterns, up until not too long ago, I can't remember exactly when. I want to say it was 50s or something. We didn't have that income tax, and the majority of Americans weren't paying all these taxes. We had tariffs. And so obviously in our lifetime, we haven't experienced an economy that, enforces those tariffs like President Trump wants to do. But I'm looking forward to seeing how this pans out. Ultimately, it comes back to making America first. When we do deals with China, when we import things from around the world, those countries are not paying what the left loves to call their fair share. The U.S. essentially foots the bill for all of our imports, and President Trump wants to be done with that. And I think that's absolutely, a great point. And I think that our economy will really thrive when America starts to be treated properly around the world.
I do admit, and as much as on like the capitalism, broader financial markets type of thing, I've increasingly in my life as I've gotten older shifted to the right, I admit. I just still don't buy the arguments from Donald Trump that this is like going to make things easier on the American consumer, because I just so fundamentally understand how these companies operate. If you're a Costco or a Walmart and you got to pay all this extra money to ship your goods to U.S. shores, there's no reality where you're going to sit there and eat the cost of that. You're going to pass that on as a tax to the consumers who then buy those things. That's the way, and the shareholders of those companies would expect those companies to do that. So to me, maybe it's ultimately an argument to encourage people to invest more money into the S&P 500 or to track these stocks in good faith or these big names or sectors that you think move, because markets only go up. And these companies have figured out ways to strategically put themselves in an advantageous position to take advantage of that. But Brian, do so in a way where they're not going to absorb that cost. First time of the show, we're talking about tariffs. Brian, I wonder if you have any thoughts directly to that comment or more general, because we don't know a lot of what the Trump economy is going to look like, Brian, but we know that it's going to start and end with tariffs.
How many economic Nobel laureates said that this was just self-evidently not a good idea? Was it
23 was the number.
23?
Yes.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, corporations are not going to do that. Just like they colluded to sort of further inflation over the last couple of years, just the way trickle-down economics didn't work. It's just another way for them to pocket their nut, and that's what they're here for. They're not here for the benefit of society.
Let's put up a couple of these more comments. Hello. Let's put up a few of these comments here before we get to our next ad break. Free market's a myth. All these corporations and billionaires are masking support for a regulated market that favors their interests as a free market. Okay, fair. Then why don't we produce more in America than outsourcing it for cheaper? See, okay, so this is actually, I love this idea, because we want real wages to rise. We want a strong economy. We all want increased take-home pay, whether that's the form of what Democrats want, which is higher minimum wage, or it's what Republicans want, which is we're going to cut taxes so you have more take-home pay. Either way, we're getting into a degree where we have more money. If we have more money, prices only are going to go up. We only get inflation if we give ourselves more money to spend in the day-to-day economy. Brian, final thoughts to you here, then to Allie, then our ad break. Brian, go for it.
We know what's going to happen. We don't need to diagnose this. There's not going to be any surprises. Profits are going to go up. Take-home pay is going to go down, and that's how the system works. That is the ideal way that the system works.
Allie, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, like that last comment noted, Trump's a big fan of bringing back energy to America, and bringing back our manufacturing from China, all of that, creating more jobs. I think ultimately is we're going to see an economic boom, economic growth, more jobs, all of that. It's going to be great for America.
And a special shout out to all of our viewers who have written questions here the last few minutes, especially Tale of the Sun 71, Joe Greco. I really like that. That question from Joe was really good. And M4 Technical. Marcelin, we have this comment from Marcelin. Brian is right. Free market becomes a race to the bottom. I'm grateful for everyone in comment for listening to the conversation. Brian, Allie, stick with us. We're coming down the home stretch. We got to take a quick visit here with our friends over at Public because they pay the bills. They keep the lights on. Hang with us. We'll be right back with both of you. Listen up, folks. Time could be running out to lock in a historic yield at public.com, but you can lock in a 6% or higher, 6% plus or higher yield with a bond account. But here's the thing. The Federal Reserve just announced a second interest rate cut. The plan, of course, is for more interest rate cuts into 2025. Good news if you're trying to buy a home, pay off that credit card debt. We're lowering the borrowing cost across the economy, but it might not be so great for the interest you earn on your cash. So if you want to lock in a 6% plus yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade corporate bonds, you might want to act fast. The good news is, folks, it just takes a couple of minutes to sign up. There's the QR code. Log it into your little fancy computer, wherever you got it. It's public.com/CT. Once you lock in your yield, you can earn regular interest payments even as interest rates decline. And trust me, because we're getting inflation closer to 2%, we're worried about the labor market now. Interest rates are going to continue to decline. Lock in a 6% plus yield with a bond account at public.com/CT. But hurry, your yield is not locked in until you invest. What's our time check? 7:50. Oh man, we have to take a look at this comment. Wait, I need my glasses. I can't see. Courtney Green says, made a public account last week, and I actually love the interface more than Robinhood. Don't tell, I guess, Robinhood that I'm cheating. So here's the thing, and my friends and family, Murphy O'Halloran says, also got a public account, very nice platform. I've said this legitimately, not just because they sponsor the show, but that this has been my personal brokerage app of choice. I think Robinhood has at times made, obviously they've gotten into issues because they gamify things too much. This is straightforward, it's smart, it's insightful. I know you're gonna say, well, JD, that's easy for you to say because they're your sponsor for the show. Yes, that's true. But I also have had a public account long before we ever launched a Common Threads. This is where I do my trading. This is where I look at cool ETFs and things that I want to invest in. Public makes it super easy. Make it your primary portfolio if you're trying to invest to the broader conversation we're talking about tonight, which is like large in part the sweet spot of the U.S. financial markets. Public lets it happen. And take a look especially over at that bond account and those offerings. All right, Brian, Allie, home stretch so far. This is the best show we've ever done. This is my favorite show we've had so far with both of you. You want to do, I'm going to ask Taylor which one he wants to do. Do you want to do the Nate Silver one, or do you want to do the 2028 one?
I 2028.
Oh boy, this is like in the absurd world of like horse race politics we're going to pay attention to. The folks over at Puck News, we love Puck News. They're dear friends of the show. They did launch a new poll right now. Who do Democrats want to see run in 2028? We're not even through this election yet. Democrats overwhelmingly support Vice President Harris to run again in 4 years. 41% support. I think we got the numbers there. We can look at it together. Gavin Newsom, 8%. Shapiro, 7%. Transportation Secretary Buttigieg at 6%. Walz at 6%. AOC at 4%. And we go all the way down the list. Raphael Warnock right now registering less than 1%. Allie, I know for you, you're probably not very interested in this because you're like, listen, we just won the election. We swept the swing states. We're focused on governing. But Allie, I am curious, is there a Democrat, has there been a Democrat kind of on the so-called bench that has made you say, you know what, maybe it wasn't Harris, but this person, that style Democrat, that's the person who talks about these things in a way that could prevent could present challenges for Republicans in future cycles?
I honestly, I don't really know how to word it, but I guess I'm just kind of like, I'm really over Kamala Harris at the moment. I mean, The campaign was a
disaster. A lot of
disaster.
people are, yes.
Yeah, the campaign was a disaster. I'm very shocked to see that she's polling that high. I'm assuming it's just a lot of liberal mid-aged women who did that poll. But also, if there's anyone on that list that I say, please, oh God, please no, it's Gavin Newsom. And it's simply because I'm Californian. I grew up under his regime, and it's been disastrous for our entire state. And California, every single Californian can speak to that. And so, I guess it would be Gavin Newsom, but we'll see. A lot of things can change in the next 4 years.
But that's the question, though, Allie. Would you actually like it to be Newsom because you think he's really beatable? It's not that you don't want it to be Newsom because you think he's going to present a challenge to J.D. Vance or whoever's up next, right?
Right. I mean, sure. Go ahead, Gavin. Give it a shot. I think, we can easily take him down based on his record.
Brian, obviously, these are like goofy topics because it's all horse race politics is goofy, and we're doing it like 4.5 years in advance. But I do think it speaks to more of an immediate here and now question of the Democratic Party looking around. You cannot continue to go to the generational leader from 2008, the dude who broke the mold, and continue to roll out former President Barack Obama and say, man, can you come back and save the party in some capacity? Like, can you pop up at these rallies? Can you make these swing state appearances? Is there another Democrat out there as a national figure, Brian, that kind of gives you hope to say, all right, didn't go the way we wanted to with Vice President Harris, but at least we got this type of person, and that gives us some reason for hope?
Well, I think my answer for my top pick for 2028 would be the same answer if it was for 2128. It's like, are you kidding me right now? I'm sure Allie would love it if Harris was the nominee again. I personally don't like any of them. I think, I would have liked to see Cori Bush run eventually. I thought she's a woman of principle who has a lot of lived experience that a lot of people could relate to. Maybe Pramila Jayapal and from Washington. Everyday, working class people.
So both squad members, Cori Bush got primaried, if I'm not mistaken, right? She didn't even get through her primary. Part of the reason, I'm not going to say it was the whole thing, part of the problem with Cori Bush was she was on the receiving end of that crypto super PAC attack. Like the crypto super PAC money for this cycle through, I think it was called Fair Shake PAC, is like such a staggering, under talked about story for 2024. They didn't just back Republicans. I want to be clear. They also backed Ruben Gallego in Arizona against Carrie Lake. They backed Alyssa Slotkin against Mike Rogers in Michigan. It's just in a lot of these other races, like against Sherrod Brown, anyone who is a crypto critic, they really went after, and they did that. They did that with Cori Bush for sure. So those are solid answers there. Time for a couple quick comments here. I'll kick these to our guests before we wrap up the show with the fan favorite segment. The R's says M4 Technical. I assume that's Republicans, unless the Baltimore Ravens, but probably Republicans, have never focused on governing in my lifetime. They are a permanent opposition party. I understand the perspective there. The idea of like the Mitch McConnell graveyard, that's where bills from the House go to die. I think there's always a muddled version of the truth. M4 Technical, just look at Trump's first term. No accomplishment with 2 years of unified government. I'd say no accomplishment. They cut taxes to budget reconciliation, but he got something done. Dems have failed to cultivate young talent since Obama. All the young rising stars get beat up by the establishment Dems. All right, and finally, there we go. This is the way to end it, folks. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, 2028. Okay, so actually, before we go to the last segment, this actually, because I think this kind of comes up as a joke, but finally to you both, Donald Trump was a celebrity for something completely unrelated to politics, and he took the world by storm. We joke about people like The Rock and people like Oprah Winfrey on the left, but obviously there's something to be said about someone who doesn't have any political experience coming through and winning the hearts and minds of voters. Brian, first to you, is that a reality for the Democrats? I mean, hey, Trump is the first president to never have had political experience, and he did something right.
Well, to be clear, he lost on a technicality the first time. Let's be clear about that. So,
right.
Yeah, I think Democrats would do well to draw from, outside their little ossified fundraising cartel, but look beyond people who have been on people, please.
Yeah, I'll end and say I agree. I think young people want an authentic candidate. I think that Hollywood is losing its grip, and ultimately young people aren't going to be really buying into that as, maybe older generations have. They want authenticity, realness. They want to know that you have their back, and will work hard in DC for us all. So
really interesting to see the parts of Queens, and I've seen various interviews with people who were stopped on the street, oftentimes voters of color, and asked directly, who'd you vote for president? They say Donald Trump. Who'd you vote for the House? They said Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And you might sit there and that's going to befuddle a lot of rank and file brains in DC who are like, make that make sense. But I think in the hearts and minds of a lot of voters, they're like, I don't really care about the party. It's like you talk about dismantling the system in a way that speaks to me because there's so many parts of the system don't work for me. And they might be two different ways to get there. But I think ironically, there's a lot more that connects an AOC and a Trump way of talking about things than we give it credit for. And I think it's incumbent on those of us with a microphone who've covered Capitol Hill, who are involved with advocacy at our community levels to pay more attention to that. Because I think to Allie's point, like something obviously seems to be working for some people and not working for others, and clearly not working for far too many Americans frustrated with the system. Time now for our fan favorite segment. This is what we're here to do. Let's play it.
Say something.
nice.
Yes, brought to you by the good friends over at Public. Allie, I'm going to give you the final word in this segment. Brian, first over to you. I know this election probably did not go the way that you want, but Brian, whether we want to admit it or not, Donald Trump, the Republicans, they won the 7 swing states. They are firmly in power of both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. Brian, I'm looking for something positive, something uplifting, a bit of common ground here in good faith, no extra swipes, something that makes you say, all right, I may not agree with it all. Brian, give me something nice about the other side.
The other side. Let's trim that fat.
Let's trim that fat. That's a
and let's go after
for
criminals. Let's go after actual criminals. Let's do that.
Trim the fat. Let's go after extra criminals. You know what? In the pantheon of answers we've gotten to this segment historically, that's up there with one of the better ones. Allie, of course, for you, hey, this is the way the election wanted, but at some point, the pendulum's going to swing back. And I know it's easy to litigate the case against liberals and against Democrats, but Allie, not all these ideas can be bad. There's got to be some bipartisanship and good faith. Give me something good, either about Harris, Biden, or the Democrats.
Oh boy. Well, I think ultimately an underlying cause of the left is that they truly want the best for people. But unfortunately, they go about it in incorrect ways that gives the power to the government versus power to the people. And they run on things like social justice and kindness, but there is nothing kind about socialism. And that's what we're here to educate the masses on. So
at least you're saying their heart's in the right place.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, ultimately, most leftists have good intentions, but they're sadly swayed by emotion and, identity politics.
Listen, Jeb Bush used to say politics ain't beanbag. I still don't entirely know what that phrase means, but I think it means it's a rough and tumble sport. We're going to get into it, but the spirit of bringing this together, and if we're going to heal kind of any of the divides that have been made worse objectively in the last decade, it's from having conversations like this. And I'm really grateful to both of you for being here, grateful for your good faith, grateful for the kind debate, and thanks to you both for making this work. That's Allie Rogers, CEO of Young Americans Against Socialism, and Brian McCullough, supportive housing director of BronxWorks, which supports the formerly homeless here in the great city, greatest city in the world, in my opinion, New York City. Brian, Allie, thank you both. We'll do it again soon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
I think this was Brian's outro to say that the food in Queens is the best that it's ever been. All right, that's awesome. Taylor, let's talk about, I don't know, what do you want to debrief on? That was awesome. They absolutely crushed it, and that's what I think the spirit of the show is supposed to be all about. They're not supposed to see eye to eye on everything.
Yeah, I know. I just really loved having them on. They were great. Both of them had very unique perspectives. It's actually funny because Brian would probably be a self-described socialist, and Allie, on the other hand, is with the Young Americans Against Socialism. So definitely juxtaposed and definitely from different corners. But I mean, that's what the show is about, right? It's just getting people that are completely that have different viewpoints and getting them to sort of hash it out. And I thought it was a really great discussion and also a lot of lively comments. We got a lot of people like in the chat going. We love it. We love it. I mean, it's just, I mean, we had like maybe near 100 comments of people just getting into the action and just always, and Allie and Brian did a great job of just sort of saying and willing to stand on what they really believed in. So you can't ask for anything more than that. We don't want people to come on here and just agree about everything. We want people to come on and say what they actually believe in, and then maybe along the way we sort of find a middle ground at some things.
You know what's so funny about this Say Something Nice segment we do at the end of every show? It's like I always tee it up in a way where I'm really trying to make it clear what we're going for. I'm like, listen, I'm baking in the fact that I know you're not thrilled with the other side for all these things. Please give me something nice, just something nice, explicitly something nice. And then invariably, we get a couple little extra added digs, a couple words this way, a couple like, you gotta just, right? You're in there, you're kind of, I'm like, just pull your punches for a minute. But like boxers are gonna box, Taylor. They're gonna sit there and just be like, pop, pop, quick little jab while the referee's not looking. I appreciate it, but I still think the spirit of it is more or less what we were looking for.
Yeah, I think they both did great. I think Brian is a wizard at sarcasm. I don't know. I'm pretty sure he really does have the best intentions on trimming the fat.
They're still there listening, by the way.
But of course, they're friends of the show. Friends of the show
now.
But honestly, like, and Brian, I'll grab a beer with him at some point and tell him that right to his face. But you know, it was Say Something Nice is all about just realizing that, hey, you're gonna have a grandmother that says some weird shit. You're gonna have someone that's just a little bit like different from the way you view things, and you got to be able to say something nice. You got to be able to give her a hug and give her like a little bit of a birdhouse that she can put in her front yard, right? Like if you can at least do that, and if you can at least say something nice, then maybe we won't tear ourselves apart, and we will actually be able to be civil.
But while I still have you, I want to take a look at a few of the other top headlines. These are just kind of breaking right now in the last little bit, or at least a few developments. Up at Media right now, obviously, we've got the Pam Bondi news front and center. Glad we hit on that on the top of the show. The timing worked out there, and Allie and Brian did a great job with that. Gates reportedly withdrew from AG consideration after Trump told Gates he did not have the votes. That was a story that broke in the last little bit. This one we didn't get into with the guest, and I'm curious if you have thoughts on this, Taylor, if you know this guy or you watch him on cable news. Trump reportedly considering ex-Fox News host Dan Bongino to lead the United States Secret Service. Got some reactions in the room from that one. Working in the show. But like, if you like Pete Hegseth, stay for the Dan Bongino Senate nomination.
All right, so this is going to be a live demo right now. I did not realize that news, but why don't we just pull up Dan Bongino's X account and let's see what that looks like, right? So Dan Bongino, I just know that he said some crazy shit over the years. I had never worked with him personally. For anyone who's wondering, I was at Fox Business a long time ago. I never actually worked with Dan. But yeah, I'm going to share my tab here and maybe zoom in a little bit to hopefully it's reasonable. And goes after me because cutesy time is over. Follow me on Rumble. Oh, did he like clean up his feed and not say anything like absolutely wackadoodle?
Or he deleted the wackadoodle stuff. Yeah.
Check the replies. That's where wackadoodle stuff lives.
You know what? Maybe he just cleaned up the account and there's nothing crazy there. But yeah, he basically hosts these very regular shows where he just goes off about how main focus is corrupt media and that there's this big concerted effort to disenfranchise anyone that has a big opinion. You know what? I noticed that both of our guests are still here. I actually would be curious to hear from them. If we could go to trips with our guests, Dan, I just want to get their thoughts on the Dan Bongino stuff. Guys, are you still around? And I see BMAC there too.
I'll go ahead. I am a self-admitted Dan Bongino fan. I listen to him multiple times a week. So come at me with Dan Bongino comments.
But come at me, bro. Brian, I don't know how much you dig into Dan Bongino. So yes, I had to remind myself. He obviously was with Fox News. Firebrand to say the least. No longer with Fox News. But that's at least the report. And I got to stand corrected, by the way, on something I said. The director of the Secret Service is appointed by, serves at the pleasure of the president, is not subject to Senate confirmation. Yeah. The director reports to Secretary of Homeland Security and operates with the general directions thereof.
Thank you for clarifying that. I would have loved to watch his Senate confirmation hearings if possible. He's just a professional angry asshole. Like that's not a job. Maybe he'll be better at Secret Service, which is an actual job. But at this point, I'm expecting like the next cabinet suggestion to be like fucking Alf. Like he's just running out of people on TV to give jobs to, you know?
Is this a live thing we're watching from Bongino or no? No,
this is just a random video.
This is just a random video. Okay, so I don't know what to do with the guests now. Okay, so that's okay. That's the latest we got on Bongino. I don't think we have any other like really big breaking news at this hour. Allie, you got something? Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, Dan Bongino served under Obama. I believe he served with Bush. I don't believe that he served with President Trump in his first term. But just the way that, you know, if you actually do listen to a whole entire show of Dan, he is very knowledgeable and very concerned about the president's safety. And I think that he would take the job extremely seriously and actually be very proud to be in that position, as he has talked about at length on his show multiple times. And, you know, if he gets picked, that would be great. I would love to see that. If it's someone else, great as well. And yeah, I don't have any doubts that Dan would be a great addition to the secret security.
Now, I will just say,
yeah, Brian, go for it.
Personally, I'm not familiar with Mr. Bongino's oeuvre, but to me personally, anyone who joins the military in peacetime is a person of interest, and like that's not, you know, you have to be a very specific kind of person that you know is it's not someone I'm going to plan a picnic with, but I do think that he would be very loyal to Trump, which is probably what he needs, as loyalty is the top priority for Trump, not expertise or moral compass or sexual fidelity to their partners. So he's got the loyalty thing, so he'll fit right in.
Allie, any response? I'm just gonna leave it there in case you want. If not,
I mean, hey, after you know, President Trump surviving the assassination attempt in July, I think that loyalty is an important position or an important characteristic to have as your secret security director. Someone that's invested in your overall health and safety is definitely a top concern as someone who has now survived 2 assassination attempts. Sorry, am I getting tired here?
Yeah, of course. I think we all are, understandably so. And you've both been total rock stars for hanging out with us, not just for the hour, but pushing, what was that? But pushing beyond it as well. Brian, Allie, thank you. That was like extra time. That's like when you come back out for a little bit of OT, because we hadn't settled the debate at the end of 3 periods for regulation, so we had to go to OT. I think we'll have to just play a second game another time with both of you to really determine who came out on top. Brian McCullough, Allie Rogers, thank you both. That's awesome to have you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, folks. What are we doing now?
him a nice long goodbye.
All right. Yeah, can we guests, thank you both for being here. What are you cooking on over there, Dan? Oh, Dan's mouse died in his computer. That's why we got the guests. I'm sure Allie and Brian are like,
Oh, Dan, I haven't.
what are we doing here right now?
We got a surplus.
You know, this is where I wish we had the other camera in the studio so everyone could see what the team is doing right now. Because it's like just to watch the producers. Brian, Allie, I'm. They're both like, do we have to keep our shots up right now because we don't know what we're supposed to be doing here?
He's probably talking about Ben and Jerry's or something right there. Real, real patriot.
I think he is. All right, I think we're good now. Allie and Brian, thank you both. That was awesome. Appreciate it. Oh man, that was awesome. Great time. And I love the guests were like nearby and like, hey, I mean, we're not gonna like disconnect from the show. We got a few more things to say here.
We'll
Why
be
not?
ready. We got 10 seconds whenever you sell it.
So this is so first of all, quick programming note. This is our last show before Turkey Day. Right? This is it.
Take that week off. We'll be back to follow.
Yeah, we will. So we're going to be off for Thanksgiving night. Don't worry, because I know there's thousands of people out there that are like, I don't want to watch football. I don't want to sit with my family. I want to watch a political debate show on Thursday. So you know what I'm going to say here, because this was a thing we used to do. It's like for Thanksgiving, you say the things you're grateful for, and you talk about that. So that's what I'm going to do, because it's my fucking show. What the fuck else am I going to do? It's my show. I do what I want. So number one, I need to shout out my best friends and my loved ones who know that this year, this calendar year, 2024, was really difficult on me for health, for personal, some professional headwinds, and the true scale of those things, very few people know. The people I love most in this world, they're all over the place. They're in Jersey, Minnesota, Door County, Wisconsin, San Francisco, Toronto. They know who they are. They know everything they did for me this year, and I'm super grateful for them for this Thanksgiving season. Number two, in the wise words of our president-elect, I want to thank the haters and losers. And I hope that my success in 2025 causes you absolutely nothing but misery. And in case you think I'm joking, there have been people in this industry who have tried to tear me down in the last 12 months. And I'm so sorry for what the new year is going to bring to you. And then number three, we've got Taylor, we've got Chris, we got Dan, we got Alexi, we got Danielle, an incredible team here at Common Threads. They have ideated this, they have hustled this, they have brought to this project every week their enthusiasm, their professionalism, the best of what they have. I'm so thankful for their creativity. And while I've got this, you know, for Thanksgiving season, this is how I'm so filled with gratitude. My therapist, Natalie, is always like, make sure you're writing down every day the things you're grateful for. But the people who make the show work need to know how deeply grateful I am for them. And that's all I got. That's it. That's Thanksgiving time. What are we doing here? I'd imagine that's not apple juice I'm about to be served here for this Thanksgiving drink. There we go. Yeah, to pull it into frame. That was one of my intentions. That's JD. Am I drinking this right now? You are. What is this? Oh, wait, what is this, by the way? Okay, this is Jack. It's whiskey. Dan, I know you're not mic'd up, but can you tell me quick about the story here? Where is this and where does it come from?
It comes from Japan.
Comes from Japan.
It's one of the biggest whiskey makers in Japan.
Okay.
And it's one of their, I think, most common whiskeys.
One of their most common whiskeys. Okay, that's awesome. What are we doing here?
Just pour us a couple.
Oh, yeah. Yo, so let's get cooking. Come on. This is it. You know, this was the week I told myself, like, I'm not going to drink that much. I got to like, be professional and go do all these other things. But no, this is a Thanksgiving cheers. And whoever's that was just got a lot. And I'm not really sorry. Cheers to one and all. My many blessings to everyone here in the room in the show and everyone who's watched for the Thanksgiving holiday. I'm so sorry in advance that at 4:30 you're all going to be stuck watching the Giants and Cowboys. I know it's two pitiful football games, but listen, it's Thanksgiving. Sit with your family, eat food, watch football. Sorry in advance for how poor the Giants are going to play. And a cheers to one and all. Happy Thanksgiving. Cheers to all. We're counting down. We will see you in 2 weeks back here at Common Threads. Thanks for watching. Thanks to Allie and Brian. We'll see you again soon. Woo!